Hello, everybody. Welcome to eTalks. This week, once again, we have a very special guest, Paweł Maslag from Garfield, New Jersey. He was born in Nowa, Poland, and immigrated to Garfield, New Jersey with his parents and brother at just 1 year old. He has attended elementary, middle, and high school in Garfield Public Schools. After graduating, he has completed a year of AmeriCorps service with City Year New York, and later worked for several nonprofit organizations in NYC. From working at Habitat for Humanity New York to U.S. Fund for UNICEF, Pavel's passion has always been working and advocating for social causes that he believes in. Being the first in his family to attend college, he continued his passion for social causes at Columbia. From being a peer educator to serving on the student council, Pavel ensured that activism was a part of his experience during his 4 years at Columbia. Pavel was awarded the prestigious Bill Campbell Award for his student leadership during his graduation. That's awesome. And Pavel is the co-founder and co-executive director of Garfield Neighbors, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating and aiding Garfield residents in need. Since graduating from Columbia, Pavel has worked at Columbia's University Public School of Health and Yale's University School of Public Health and Goldman Sachs Office of Corporate Engagement. And he's a councilman in Garfield, right?
Yep, exactly.
So Paweł, welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for that introduction. I'm always kind of like stumped whenever I hear my kind of like bio being read. I'm like, man, like I've done quite a bit of different things in my relatively young life so far. And, I think one of the biggest things I'm most proud of is running for public office. And to my surprise, funny enough, being elected, which I could go into a little bit more later on, but I'm really happy to share my story with all the viewers and also kind of like talk about uh, running for office, especially as a young person, and how do you become an advocate for change in our communities, whether it be locally, nationally, or globally.
That's awesome. So I would like to first start by asking, how did you decide to run for office at such a young age, and what motivated you?
Yeah, so not to have kind of like the cliche progressive kind of like story, but I never planned to run for office. Where I think oftentimes when especially young people that when they run for office, there's kind of like a deeper reason behind why they run for office, whether it be for a social issue, a cause they believe in. It's never really kind of like about being a politician. It's more about kind of like what you believe in and how you hope that the world will be organized or seen in your way. And for me, on with my background working for nonprofits, with grassroots activism, whether it be on campus at Columbia or in my community as well in Garfield, a lot of it came down to just being more involved. I think young people have such a great power when it comes to being involved, whether it be volunteering with organizations, starting your own organization, running for office, helping on campaigns, having your voice to be heard, whether it be at city council, local club meetings, volunteer organizations, nonprofits, all these things. I think young people have such a strong voice. And for me, like I mentioned, I never thought about running for office, but I have a high school friend of mine who she was one of the youngest elected members of the Garfield City Council. I reached out to her about running for office. Well, actually, I should clarify, not about running for office, but about how she ran for office. So my intention going into a really quick coffee chat with her was not about learning how to run for office, but about her experience running for office and local government.
So you were
And
kind of
I,
inspired by her story as well.
yeah, so I think a lot of it came down to, like a very honest and frank conversation about like how do we get more things done in Garfield and a little bit more context around the city. So we're in northern New Jersey, so right outside of New York City. It's about like a 20-minute drive, 23-minute drive, 40-minute train ride. I'm in New York almost daily. I worked in New York, went to school in New York, commuting back and forth with Garfield and city. But Garfield in Bergen County, which is almost 1 million residents, we are the lowest income city out of 70 different cities within the county. Our poverty rate, based on different statistics, roughly about 20%. So about 1 in 5 Garfield residents are living below the poverty line. And with Bergen County, if you're familiar, it's a very wealthy county. So a lot of people that work in New York have high-paying jobs. They have houses in Bergen County. Garfield's a little bit different. We're on the lower end of the county geographically. The upper part of Bergen County is more higher income. So there's a great need in Bergen County. I myself grew up low income. My parents and I immigrated to Garfield when I was 1 year old, and I was the first of my family to go off to college. So a lot of my background experience has been growing up in Garfield, the place I now am part of the local city council with. But I went to the meeting wanting to know more about what else and what more can we be doing for our Garfield residents who are low income, whether it be about food insecurity, housing insecurity, all these different issues that are experienced by our low income residents. And I should really note that it's not just those that fall below the poverty line, but also those that are just above. And United Way has a really informative way to describe uh, those in that kind of demographic area with the Alice stat. And those are people who are just above the poverty line, who may not qualify for different services, but they still are experiencing things like food insecurity, housing insecurity, but they're not qualifying for a lot of programs that are focused on people living below the federal poverty line. And
So I have a question. So you have
mhm.
talked about your experiences, like running for the office, and you're living in. So are you living in Garfield right now?
Yep. So because I'm an elected member of
Hmm.
Garfield City Council, I'm living in Garfield, and
Also,
it's where I've been calling home since I was one.
that's awesome. So I want to ask about what are your, for example, top three or top five social causes that really motivated you, especially as a young person, to run
Mhm.
for office? And what do you think that young people care about today as, what kind of social causes? Because you have kept mentioning young people, young people. I'm thinking on the one hand, there is the young blood, there is the young people who are very excited, very passionate. And then there is a much more older age where people are considering experience, maturity. So what makes young people more different in the office, especially? And what are first your, and what do you think other young people's passions today?
Yeah. So I think one of my top three issues I'm very much focused on, and a lot of it comes down to what the needs are locally, and also from my own experience, my lived experience of number one, I think access to healthcare is very important. I, for myself, um, was on the state insurance plan, NJ Family Care, which is for low income residents for most of my life. Funny enough, funny enough, probably not the best way to describe it, but unfortunately, my first time ever having like actual insurance, not that was from the state, was when I was elected to Garfield City Council under the municipal insurance plan. So I think access to healthcare, whether it be insurance, equitable care from providers, um, transportation to hospital, all these different things are very important. So I think access to healthcare, housing, um, so having a safe and affordable place to live. And I think three, in terms of economic inequality, as many people have experienced and are experiencing economic inequality in the US is at dramatically high rates, and it's only going up and increasing. So those are three issues that I care deeply about, and I try to impact that through policy in Garfield. And in terms of young people, I think it's very much, and I kind of shy away from speaking for young people because we all have like different things we focus on and we care about and we are very passionate about. I think from my experience looking at climate change has been a very big issue that a lot of young people do care about um, when it comes to economic inequality as well. And I should also mention that, and I want to stress the fact that racial equality is a very big issue in the US.
Absolutely.
And I think especially in Garfield, when it comes to a very diverse population, racial equality is very important to address and really name as something that one really is focused on in terms from a policy standpoint. So I think those are my three main issues, and also three issues that young people do care about, and they are overlapping, where it's really tough to really focus on just one issue when all of those other issues are impacting that one single issue as well.
That's definitely, that's a great answer. So as well as, what are your top three issues and what are some young people's? And I would like to ask that, so while running for office, have you ever had the concern that maybe politics would be too polarizing? For example, in the United States, there are some opinions that, American politics is very, very polarizing, and people kind of mix up between, being elected versus being in the politics, like that's in that spectrum. So how did you feel like running for office to create a change rather than, be part of that political, I would say, I don't want to use the word fight, but in that realm?
Yeah, so I initially ran or declared my candidacy for office before the pandemic. During that time, the issues were going on. I think that a lot of political division has been building over the last decade. Some will argue for multiple decades. I think it's tough and I do notice that there's been less of a want or kind of like a desire to run for office for young people, because right now, like, the political climate, and we see that when it comes to issues regarding the LGBTQ plus population, where we've been seeing, especially marginalized populations, be not only even more stigmatized, but in a lot of ways more ostracized because of the political division. And it could be very um, demotivating for a lot of young people and people in general to want to be more involved in politics, where when they see all this division and they see at the same time so much more inequities being promoted. We see that in Tennessee, where the LGBTQ plus population has been even more marginalized by public policies set forth by the governor of Tennessee. And I think oftentimes, even for myself, when I'm going to be running for reelection in 2024, I do think, wow, like, this is a lot that's happening. And
Definitely.
I think if we stay on the topic of the LGBTQ plus population, 2 years ago, with a local community organizer and activist, Dre, who I'll give a shout out, we organized the very first Pride event in Garfield. So up until that time, we've never had a Pride event, never really kind of like a formalized way to recognize our LGBTQ plus population. And I think it really comes down to having people who are very deeply passionate about these issues and are willing to really go forth and fight for equity and a more equitable world. And a lot of that comes down to having the proper people in office. So
Definitely.
it's really tough when you see the division, you see
Mhm. The
what
polarization
running.
is especially a big issue, I guess. But
Mhm.
I also want to ask about the nonprofits that you have worked for, and I would say you would like to recommend to our audience, because I know that nonprofits are a huge part of, creating change in the world. Unfortunately, not everybody has the courage to run for office, but I would say reaching out to a nonprofit or an NGO, it is much easier and accessible to people. So can you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so I, for one, started a nonprofit organization to provide more support for Garfield residents. So that's an example of a grassroots organization, and there's many around. I know the viewers are from all over the place, even the world. So there's many local nonprofit organizations. So I do recommend reaching out, seeing what's out there, and joining one that you're passionate about. I do think that there's one really great organization called Global Citizen. And for those unfamiliar, Global Citizen is an advocacy organization that creates a platform for people to be more engaged in policy and activism. They provide a platform. It's all through an app, which is really cool. And you're able to sign petitions. You're able to send out tweets and Instagram postings based around issues that you really care about. So, for example, if you're very passionate about gender equality, you're able to see what issues that you could take part in when it comes to gender equality. So that might be signing a petition or tweeting about your belief in gender equality, all these different things. So if you're looking for a way to get involved, not too sure how, I recommend Global Citizen, where you're able to really engage with different issues globally.
And how about if, if some of our audience, if we would like to start our own nonprofit, what were some steps that you have taken that, or some things that needs to be cautioned for? So would you like to help us out on how to start a nonprofit for a social cause?
Yeah, so in terms of nonprofits, for the global viewers, I think it's important to know that it's kind of like a legal status in the US. So it does look like different ways across different countries and kind of like their kind of like legal statuses. But for the US, and this could also be said for around the world, where if you have a group of friends or colleagues or people that you know that are really passionate about an issue, getting together and kind of like formalizing a way they can work towards solving that problem or working towards resolving that issue. For us, it was my high school friends from Garfield. The pandemic initially began, and food insecurity was a really big issue that a lot of people were going through. So we got together. We literally went on Zoom, eventually in person when the pandemic subsided a little bit, and we're providing food relief to Garfield residents. And that was all without the legal status. But then eventually, if you want to get donations and be more formalized and be like an official nonprofit, you would have to, in the US, file for a 501c3 designation, which would be a nonprofit status, which is all kind of like the legal, kind of like the paperwork, the kind of like that whole thing. But really, all it takes is a group of people that care about an issue to get together and figure out a way that you can do your part to help resolve it.
That's awesome. I love how you say it's just all about gathering up the people first. So, as well as the promotion side, for the projects and the organizations that you do in the office, as well as the nonprofits.
Mhm.
So, what are some ways to reach out people? I know you're probably going to say social media on one hand, but how are we going to use social media, or how are we going to reach out? Because the issues that we live in today, like the racial equality, gender equality, socioeconomic status issues, all these issues are very wide range problems. And, while organizing an event, how are we going to reach out to people? What are some tips and tricks, I would say? So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think one big tip I could provide to people that are organizing, especially events and ways to get people together for volunteering, or, for example, like an e-talk, right? Really identifying people who are, I want to say, influential in communities where they have a large following. So whether it be on social media or in person, and really engaging them to help spread the word, where in an organization, when you're first starting, or if you're starting an initiative, it can be pretty tough to get the word out by just the organization itself. But if you have a team of people and you use your network to help spread the word, I think that's really vital and important, because one person might know 10 people. Out of those 10 people, each one knows 10 people. If you do the math, like, that's a huge number. So I think like spreading the word through engaging, or be like ambassadors, or kind of like, not like political ambassadors, but like ambassadors for your organization, or people that just really care about and want to help spread the word. Identifying those really influential people that can help spread that word, that know a lot of people, and that care about the mission.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, thank you so much. So, one other question is that while organizing events, what do you think are the type of events that attract most attention? For example, for an issue, is it like a conference type of thing that is more interesting to people? Because while trying to create a change, people are considering what are some ways, what are some formats, I would say, that we can reach out to people about an issue that we are passionate about. So it's like a seminar, symposium, a parade, a conference, or a concert, a gallery. So what are some ways that have attracted your attention about the events that people are attending, for a social cause or for a change?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think from my experience, whether it be as an organizer or someone that attends, I think if there's two things that I really look out for, one being able to connect with other like-minded people, and two, an action involved. Um, for example, if there might be like a volunteering event where we're bringing people together and doing a food drive or a donation drive or a talk where there is a component of meeting other people who are like-minded, which I think is very empowering for not only the group but for each individual at that event. And two, if there's an action, so whether it be volunteering, so it could be providing food to people, or it could be collecting food donations, or it could be, at the end of a talk, a call to action to reach out to your members of Congress and demand that they pass this, legislation to like combat food insecurity. So I think like if there's an opportunity to connect with like-minded people, and also an action involved, whether it be at the moment, at the event, or after the event as well.
All right, awesome. So while talking about actions, you said maybe call an action to donate somewhere or to volunteer. So I want to kind of shift our topic to small businesses. So as an elected official in a community that you have, grow up in, so what are your thoughts on small businesses? How can we support small businesses? What are the roles of support businesses for a social change? For example, one thing that always comes to my mind is maybe collaborating with a small business to run a food drive or to maybe host an event where they provide the materials and all the money that is collected goes to that change. So what are your some advices on collaborating with small businesses?
Yeah, another really great question. So I think when it comes to small businesses, Garfield has many of them. Um, when it comes to supporting them, as you always probably hear, shop local, you're supporting your local businesses. So like that's a really easy way to do that. And two, also in a similar way, if you're organizing events, rather than kind of like catering with Chipotle, is there a catering opportunity with a small local business to provide them business? So those are two ways. Um, but also I think an important way, and my work at Goldman Sachs was a part of this, where we had the 10,000 Small Businesses Initiative. Um, small business owners, and really, so it was a program helping small business owners gain the skills, knowledge, resources to level up their small businesses. And there was an interview process, and I was one of the people that would interview businesses. And there was I love learning about construction businesses in like Florida, very, or like a hairdresser from like California. Like I would interview all these business owners, and one thing I learned, they're busy, they're working at their business, right? Like the hairstylist owns the actual storefront, but they're also the ones that are cutting hair. And oftentimes, when it comes to small business owners, even if there's a lot of different programs available to them, whether it be small business grant programs or mentorship programs, they might not know about them because they might just be really busy with running their own business. And I think for my role at being on city council is really working with the small businesses for them to know about the programs and also helping them get into the programs as well. There are a number of programs that are helping small businesses. One of them is Goldman Sachs's program, 10,000 Small Businesses, but there's many others that might be more local as well, from county or state governments, that they might not know about. In Garfield, we had a grant for one of our main streets. It was grants, I believe, $5,000 for small businesses to improve their storefront. So new signage, new awnings, free money. Like, here you go, you just have to fill out this paper. And the only way people would know about the program was if they heard about it, right? So that was my role of helping spread the word about this program.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will, love to know more about small businesses because I know that, I never actually thought about the perspective that they actually work so much that we have to reach out to them in a way that's awesome. So how about, so you yourself had mentioned that Garfield has a diverse population
Mm.
and many cities in the US, US itself is a very, very diverse country and running for a social cause, trying to create a change for a cause that we're passionate about, how can we actually bring people together that are from different diverse backgrounds, whether it be, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status. So how can we help, bring diverse backgrounds together? How can we, create this sort of unity for something that we're very passionate about and that we can show that everybody can care about that same cause?
Yeah, and that's kind of where a lot of different political campaigns are trying to figure out how to best do that. Um, I think engagement is really important. Where as if we're thinking about like political organizing, a lot of it comes down to whether it's a group or an individual really engaging in those groups and inviting them, and creating the space for them and assuring and really creating the space where everyone does feel comfortable, and does feel empowered to be there. I think that's really important. So a lot of it comes down to really just engaging and building relationships across different backgrounds. And that's in terms of the political organizing. And I think also in terms of how do we create a world more like that. A lot of it comes down to uh, policies that are in place that are creating more segregation and undoing them. So a lot of it comes down to when we think about economic inequalities, where we do have communities who are predominantly higher income, predominantly white, and in a lot of ways we think about that as segregation, and we have to really undo those policies that are creating that segregation if we want to create a world where we have people from different backgrounds coming together. And one thing that it's been catching a little bit more steam in terms of urban planning has been more creation of walkable cities, which have diverse backgrounds in terms of income. So inclusionary zoning, where if we have a new development coming in, we want to make sure that's not just high-priced luxury apartment buildings, but also ones where there's population within the apartment building for low income market rate apartments, and also if we want to also include higher income populations as well. And the third place where Garfield, we are currently in the process of building 2 new parks. So creating the third place where it's free to go to, you're not paying to go to a park, but you're able to ideally meet with people from your community as well. Where if you don't have those places, it's really hard to meet people um, from different backgrounds in your own community.
So connecting with other, diverse backgrounds would really key. That's awesome. So I would like to ask, I would actually tell very little story. So after
Mhm.
our earthquake relief live stream, an eighth grader from our community has texted me a screenshot that she and her couple friends in their middle school has just ran like this fundraiser. And again, they're eighth graders and,
Mhm.
she's the, oldest grade in the middle school, but they have raised more than $700 in a span of just a week or two, and they're very, very young, and we can't say they're children. So can we just say that there's basically no age to start something for a good cause or something we're passionate about? Because I was always thinking that maybe you have to be at a certain age to mature, to have certain experiences. But when I saw her message about she was very excited. I don't know exactly what they did, but I think they just ran a fundraiser and they raised more than $700, $800 in a span of a week, which is absolutely great. So can we just give that message that there is basically kind of no age to run for something that is a social cause to create a change.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. And, big shout out and congratulations to that group of eighth graders. I definitely do think that there really is no age. You could be as young or as old as you want. I think, it's always really great to see young people in elementary school, right? Like they're raising money for different organizations and causes that they believe in. I think that's really incredible. And that lasts a lifetime where if we engage young people in activism, in organizing, in fundraising, all these different things, where it's not just like uh, when they're in eighth grade, but I think it really does last through a lifetime, like for myself, right? So I think that's really incredible, and I'm a huge advocate of having young people be more involved in activism and organizing, fundraising, all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Pavel, for being with us tonight. So I have the actually four special e-talks questions that we
Yep.
ask at the every end of episode. So number one, what is your favorite color?
Yes, my favorite color is actually blue. I have two blues on right now. My room is blue, so blue is my favorite color.
That's awesome. All right. Number two, what are some two to three books that you would like to recommend to our audience?
Yeah, so I think the first one that comes to mind is Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. For those that are unfamiliar, I highly recommend his book, also his TED Talk, and Brian spelled with a Y. But he is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, and he founded it to represent and serve people Alabama's death row to provide them legal assistance. And I don't want to spoil the book. It's an incredibly motivating book, but all of it comes down to redemption, providing justice and equity for those that we might deem as least likely to deserve it. But he will make the argument if you read the book or listen to the TED Talk that we all deserve mercy and redemption. And another book I think that's been really helpful in terms of my understanding of the world is the book Caste. I'm forgetting the author's name. It's spelled Caste, but it talks about the ways that uh, the caste system, especially in the U.S. and even abroad, internationally, is a system of inequality that persists. Um, and a third book that I have not read, it came out earlier this week, but I've read an article from the New Yorker and New York Times about this, but um, uh, Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, who's a sociologist who wrote the book Evicted, talks about how uh, we actively create policies that create inequalities and poverty in the US, and we're benefiting from those policies for those that are not below the poverty line. It's a really great book from what I've read with the reviews, but one thing that he really does write about is kind of that we're all, like I mentioned, benefiting from it. So when it comes to housing insecurity, those that are able to afford rent actually benefit from those that aren't able to afford rents. And he goes into greater detail, but it's a really great book from my understanding. But I
That's
will be
awesome.
reading it soon.
All right, I'm sure our audience and I'll be reading it soon too because it really seems interesting. So number three, what are some two to three movies that you would like to recommend to us?
Yeah, that's actually really tough. So I'm not. I always have trouble with this question, but I think two movies like really come to mind. Um, and one of them is The Last Black Man of San Francisco. It's a beautiful movie. It's about what the title would uh, provide. It's about gentrification, about housing, about racial inequality. It's a beautiful movie. Um, and a second movie is The Florida Project. It's about housing, homelessness. It's about a mother and her young child living in a motel in Orlando, Florida. And it's by A24, so it's a a great movie. Production's really amazing. But those are two movies that like really strike me, and I can't think of a third one, but it'll probably come to me after we're done.
Yeah, it's okay, no problem. And last but not least, by the way, we will be listing your books and movies in our social media. So guys, make sure to follow our social media. They're linked in the description box. So it will be recommended as Paweł Maslag's book and movie recommendations. So thank you. Last but certainly not least, we would like to ask your opinions about art.
Yeah, so I love art. I think art. So I'm a frequent goer of any museum in New York. And whenever I'm visiting a city, I always make the intention of visiting that local city's museum. I think it's a really great way to understand the world and from the standpoint of the artist. And I cannot recommend just going to a museum wherever you are and seeing from their perspective, from that city, from that time period, what the visuals were that artists were trying to demonstrate in their artworks.
All right, awesome. Well, thoughts about art is very awesome. So, for me, when I was in a new city, I was, tried to go to the museums first, and then what are some, local artwork that are there. So that's awesome. So thank you so much for attending eTalks today. We learned so much about creating change, you running for office, emphasizing that young people, especially, here out there, making change and running for social causes, and they're very passionate about this, and thank you for sharing your experiences, and thank you for the wonderful answers to eTalk's special questions.
No, of course, happy to be here, and Ramadan Mubarak for all those that are celebrating Ramadan.
Thank you so much. All right, and I would like to thank our audience for attending us tonight. And make sure to like and subscribe to eTalks, and make sure to tune in for the next episode. See you guys.